My name is Toni Wortherly. I'm 46 years old. Is about how my anxiety affected my life and how now I have transitioned from being a worrier to being a warrior. When my anxiety first began, my earliest memories of it were around 3 years old. I definitely knew that I was different growing up. I have pictures of me, and just about every picture of me, I'm screaming my head off, and I don't really know why. Only if my mother was holding me or my godmother was holding me did I feel some sense of safety, I guess. And I remember the earliest memory of being anxious that I remember is when I was 3 years old. We live here in Florida and there was a storm outside. And I remember being in my house and being absolutely terrified that the house was going to flood, that the water was going to get in, that we were going to float away, or that the walls were going to cave in on us. That is one of my earliest memories. The anxiety and worry definitely manifested throughout my adolescent years. I tended to be a very shy and withdrawn kid. I did not have a whole lot of friends. People kind of scared me a little bit, especially people my own age. So it took a while for me to get to know people. The thing that kind of brought me out of my shell was in high school when I got into theater. For whatever reason, being on the stage, I didn't feel those same feelings like I felt at home on stage. I felt comfortable on stage, and I was able to perform without being anxious. But in my everyday life, I had all kinds of social anxiety as well as just general anxiety about different things that would happen in my life. I really didn't handle it. People not really understanding who I was. I didn't know back then. People didn't really talk about anxiety or the word anxiety. I was called a worrywart a lot. And growing up as a Christian, it was hard because in my faith and what I'd read, I'm not supposed to worry. So I lived with a constant guilt that I was worried about different things all the time. And then that worry would kind of take over me at times. In high school, my social life basically evolved around my 3 best friends and the theater. And as far as worrying and anxiety, I prayed. I didn't really have a relationship with the pastor that we had at the time to talk to them about it, but I talked to my mom a lot. My mom is actually one of my best friends, and I talked to her about it a lot, and she prayed for me, and we just kind of went through it. Therapy wasn't really, a thing that people did back then. For stuff like that, it was just you know what, you need to just calm down. You need to be a kid. You need to let the adults worry about the adult things, and you be a kid and just be you. I think in elementary and middle school, being kind of an outcast affected me. In high school, I grew a harder shell. Like I said, I kept my circle small, and I just kind of made it, this is my reality and this is who I am, and people can accept me for who I am or not. And I almost took it to the extreme because I became, if you ask people who knew me back then, and I can admit it, I became quite arrogant. You either love me for me or you want to be around me or you don't. And if you don't, that's your loss. I had this really high sense of confidence, but it was a false confidence because it was more of just an armor to keep people from hurting me. I didn't allow people to get close to me that might hurt me. So I just kind of kept people at an arm's length, except for the people who had proven to me that I could trust them with the person that I actually was. My teen years and my college years were absolutely exhausting because I felt like I was wearing a mask every day because I was trying to be this tough person on the exterior. Meanwhile, on the interior, when I was home, I was in my head. My thoughts were constantly racing way far off into the future, further than things I was imagining, things that would happen. And it got to the point where I did not like to be alone with my own thoughts. So I would try to drown them out with music or TV or anything that could possibly keep me from actually hearing the thoughts that were going on in my head, because my thoughts were a scary place. When I couldn't avoid them, there was a lot of crying. Like I said, my heart would beat so incredibly fast that it even felt like it was skipping beats. And yet I was still just afraid to tell people that that was actually happening. And it wasn't until I was 19 years old. So when I was a freshman in college, I had gone home to visit my parents, and for spring break. And when I got back from spring break, there was one night where my friends from the dorm were all out and I was in the dorm. I don't remember if I had to study or something, but I was in the dorm by myself. My boyfriend at the time, who went to college like 3 hours away, I couldn't reach him on the phone. And then I tried calling my parents. I couldn't reach them on the phone. And then my mind just started racing again. And I started having that heart palpitation feeling. And I just wanted that to end. I just wanted to be done with it. I was tired of living like that. And I had been previously ill, so I had some medicine. And I sat down at my desk and I poured out pills into my hand and I actually prayed. And I was like, God, I don't want to die. I just want to stop feeling like this. I just want this to stop for a while. So I had the pills in my hand and I was praying, and then the song that I used to listen to when I was younger popped into my head. It wasn't even on. It's crazy because when I think back on it, I'm like, it sounded to me like somebody was playing it on the radio. But it was a gospel song by Tremaine Hawkins called He's That Kind of Friend. And it was a reminder from God to me that he was still there for me, like even if I couldn't find anybody else to be there for me. And then I started to calm down. I put the pills back where they were, but that was kind of the breaking point where I knew like I need to get help. But I was still kind of digging my way out of that. So I transferred schools after that so I could be closer to home. And when I transferred to my school in Florida, I found out that they had a counseling center. That was one of the first things that I did when I got to that school, was went to the counseling center. At that point in my life, therapy was a little more in. And going to talk to a counselor was a little more in. So I went and sought help from a counselor. So there was a little bit of relief from going to counseling. My therapist at that time just kind of helped me with some coping mechanisms for when I had like an anxious episode. So if I had like a big project due, or if I had like a big social event coming up, that counselor helped me with different techniques to kind of get through it. But the word anxiety still hadn't kind of entered into the chat yet. Like it hadn't come up as part of the conversation yet. Mainly I was dealing with like losing sleep and insomnia and not eating right and not treating my body well, and just different like side effects of me being in like a constant state of worry and panic. But I did get some different techniques to kind of help me. I know now they're like grounding techniques to kind of help me get back to normal, to like breathing techniques, and there's like a tapping method and things that kind of bring you back into the moment so you can calm yourself down. The healing process is, honestly, that was when I was 19. I'm 46 now, so the length of the healing process, like 27 years. It has been a journey. When I was in law school, I started like in between college and law school, I was pretty much okay. But when I got to law school, of course, there were more triggers and more stressors and all kinds of things going on that were bringing that anxiety back up again. I had also gotten married and I was having issues in that marriage. When I started law school, I found their counseling department and I got a therapist. That therapist walked me through and helped me through my first year of law school and my issues with my marriage all the way through my divorce. And then probably about 6 months after that, there was an instance where I had a friend and we were on spring break. I don't know what it is about spring break, but we were on spring break and we were supposed to meet up during spring break. We were going to different destinations, but we were going to be close by each other. We were supposed to meet up. And so I didn't hear from him. And so I was like trying to call his cell phone and got no answer. I tried to call the house and got no answer. And then hours went by. I called again and called again. And then I called the house one time and his roommate was like, "Why have you called the house this many times?" I didn't think I had called that many times, but looking back at the phone logs between his house and his cell phone, I called him almost 50 times trying to figure out where he was. Because I got into a thought spiral of he's dead somewhere, he's been in an accident, he's on the side of the highway, and I just can't reach him. So when I got back from spring break, I was explaining that to my therapist. Like, I don't know why I freaked out like that and acted like that. And he was not happy with me when he saw all of the missed calls on his phone, because they were like rapid succession. It was like I was having an out of body experience. Like I did not even remember calling that many times. And my therapist said, okay, I think you have generalized anxiety disorder, just based on the things that you've told me before, based on this instance. And I want you to talk to a psychotherapist to confirm. So that was actually the first time that I was diagnosed. And after talking to the psychotherapist, she recommended that I continue talk therapy, but that I also go on medication to regulate, which was a scary thing for me, because as a person who kept this exterior of someone who had it all together, I definitely didn't want anyone to know that I had to take medicine to keep it all together. There was only a handful of people who knew that I saw a therapist, but a therapist and medication, that was like mortifying to me. That as smart as I was and as, I don't know, it was just mortifying to me that I would have to take medication to like regulate my mind. But I did it. We figured out the right dosages and I made it through the rest of law school. And once I got past the bar, because the bar also obviously brought up a lot of anxiety. Once I got past the bar and kind of figured out what I was going to do with my life, I was fine for a while. I was able to taper off of medication. I didn't need to go to therapy anymore. And then when I was 36, my baby nephew passed away right after he was born. And so the prospect of, and I know that babies die, but nothing like that had ever happened to my family. To that point, like I had had an aunt, my grandfather, and one of my grandmothers passed away during my lifetime, but a baby, like that possibility, it was like for my brain, it opened up a whole nother world of scary. And literally every part of the world was scary to me at that point. So I went back to my doctor and explained to her some of the things that were going on. And she actually put me back on medication. And I was on medication again for a year. I did okay. And then some years went by and then COVID happened. I'm an educator, so it really affected my work life. It affected my family. Prior to COVID, my last living grandparent passed away. My grandfather passed away. At that point in my life, I was 42 years old, divorced, no kids. I'm a person who always wanted to be a wife and always wanted to have a family of my own. And so it felt like the walls were kind of closing in on me. And then to enter this period where everyone had to be isolated for several months took a real toll on me mentally. I started seeing a therapist. It did not go well. It was not a good match for me, but I kind of stuck it out to just honestly check it off the list and say like, oh, I tried therapy. After my grandfather passed away, I was really lost because of, like I said, where my life was, and it wasn't where I pictured my life. And then about a year and a half later, there was a woman at my church who I was really close to, and she passed away. And she was 95, almost 96. And I talked to her 2 days before she passed. And in that conversation, she was crying to me about how alone she felt because it was COVID and we couldn't visit her in her nursing home. And so when I found out she passed away, not only was there the hurt because she was a friend, she was like a surrogate grandmother to me. So there was not only that hurt, but I also knew that she had like a similar situation to mine where she didn't have children of her own and she was depending on her nieces and nephews. And so I was in like a constant state of dread that like, I'm gonna die alone. Like no matter how long I live, like I'm gonna die alone. Like I have stairs in my house. I take my cell phone down the stairs with me every time I go down the stairs because I have a fear that I'll fall down the stairs or something will happen to me like on my way down the stairs and then I won't be able to call anybody for help. It just, the fear of just like my own mortality. Like again, I am a person of faith and I believe that there is life for me after this one. However, all I know is this side. And just that fear of like, one day I'm going to have to face it. And when I do, I just may be in a hospital bed or in a nursing home room, like by myself with no one to come visit me, with nobody that really cares about me. And that was like a constant thought in my life. And I would be like driving over bridges, and we have a lot of bridges in Jacksonville. And as I would drive over the bridge, I would like be like, if I just like turn my wheel this way, people would think it was an accident and no one would think of it. Like those were the kinds of thoughts that took over my mind. And so we thought that I might have sleep apnea. And I honestly think I started having panic attacks in my sleep because I would wake up just like gasping for air. And so I went to the doctor because my lack of sleep was starting to affect my daily life. And I had to drive my nephew to school. And I was like, I don't want to get in an accident with him in the car because I can't control my car because I'm not sleeping because blah, 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 And so I went to the doctor and he was like, I'm going to have you tested for sleep apnea. Went through the whole sleep test thing and they found nothing. They were like, you're just suffering from regular insomnia. So we'll give you something to help you sleep. But I feel like, just going back to what I know about panic attacks, I feel like I honestly have panic attacks in my sleep. And that's where I wake up. My mind is still on that thought and I would wake up and just be gasping for air. And there was one time that I woke up gasping and I couldn't feel my heart beating. And I got so incredibly scared. And I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And so my mom she was like, have you thought about going to therapy again? I was hesitant because of my previous experience right after COVID started with a therapist. But I prayed about it and I was like, Lord, please send me a therapist that is going to be helpful to me. I need somebody who is not going to let me manipulate them because I'm a very smart person. And I know how to say things in a way to make people think that I'm okay. And I know how to, circumnavigate situations to kind of manipulate it so that I can get out of it. I need somebody who can see through and cut through all of that and can really help me figure out what's going on. And that's when I found my last therapist. So my last therapist, one of the first things that he said to me was, if you want me to get rid of the part of you that you don't like, you're seeing the wrong therapist. And I was like, well, alrighty then. So what are we going to do about the part of me that I don't like? Because I would prefer that you just write me a prescription and I can take a pill and I can make that go away on a daily basis. And he was like, we're going to deal with it and I'm going to teach you how to keep dealing with it on a daily basis and where it's coming from so you can deal with that. And that will help you to get into a good headspace to where this is not a constant thing for you. And that's what we did. And it was hard. And I called my mom and my sister just about after every session, telling them how much I did not like him and I did not like that he was actually making me confront my feelings because I had been really good about avoiding feelings and about avoiding dealing with the feelings that I had. I would just come home at night and drown them out and turn the TV up and watch TV until I could fall asleep and ignore what was going on in my brain. And I learned that I had to actually listen to what my brain was telling me. And my therapist would make me actually sit with my own thoughts and then express my thoughts. And then we would dissect those thoughts. And what we discovered was I had not allowed myself to grieve. My grandfather's death that had happened 3 years prior, my friend's death, I had not allowed myself to grieve the fact that I was living a life that looked different than what I thought it should look like, because I felt like to be sad was to be ungrateful. And I felt like I needed to be strong for other people because I felt like other people were closer, to the person that died. So what right do I have to be this devastated over it kind of thing? And so once we figured out that the grief was really what was pushing the anxiety and the insomnia and the irritability and all of the things that were happening, then we were able to deal with that part of it. And I was able to actually express my grief and express how upsetting it was to me to have these things happen. And I learned how to cope for real. With the anxious moments when they come up, I learned how to actually confront the lies that my anxiety tries to tell me. I learned how to kind of listen for what was really bothering me and deal with that thing. And then I learned some more grounding techniques to help me kind of stay in the present, because anxiety was just about me looking far into the future and fearing about what was going to happen in the future. And it kept me paralyzed instead of moving forward with my life and really living my life. And in the past 7 months really is when I've finally felt like I am me. I'm my old self. I don't have the mask on anymore. I don't have the walls up anymore. I feel free to be the person that I am. I don't feel like I have to pretend to be someone else or pretend to have it together or fake it, because that's exhausting. Living two different lives. So right now, what I have been focusing on is my music. In addition to being an educator, I'm also a singer-songwriter. So I've been focusing on making music that encourages people. A lot of the songs that I've written have been written from a place of pain, but where that pain kind of turned into having a purpose. And that purpose is giving people hope and encouragement. And then I've also been trying to encourage other people to step out of the silence and the stigma of mental health issues, because mental health issues are something that each and every person will deal with. The intensity, the severity, the duration is different for everybody, but it's something that everyone will have to deal with. And the more people stay silent, the more people will think they're all alone, like I did. Like, nobody understands this. No one will ever understand what I'm going through. So I've made it my mission to speak out about the things that I've gone through and experienced. You hear so many times when somebody dies by suicide, like you hear people say all the time, oh, they look like they had it all together. They looked so happy. You know, they seemed like everything was going right for them in life. And that's because we can only see what we can see, right? We can only see the exterior, and we can only see what a person lets us see of their life. And I can only imagine that some of those people were doing the same thing that I was doing. They were putting up a facade, an exterior, a mask to make other people around them feel very comfortable and feel okay with them. And all the while on the inside, they were falling apart, they were shattered, they were struggling, and they were feeling like no one in the world would understand. So I've kind of made it a mission through my music and my ministry to talk openly and candidly and vulnerably about my battle with anxiety. I used to call it a struggle. Now I call it a battle because I'm equipped to fight.